everybody's life, there comes an opportunity. The difference between the people who are successful and not successful are the fact that the people either recognize the opportunity or they don't recognize the opportunity. Eventually a door opens, and you have to be ready to walk through that door. Joe Vogel, who was the head of MGM Studios, the top dog, he was the one who hired us to do this. When we got the assignment, the Czechs, they had no idea what was coming, really, because you have to understand, at that time, it was Czechoslovakia. It was an Iron Curtain, communist-run country. They had little or no access to Western entertainment. The staff of the studio at that time, none of them had ever seen a single Tom and Jerry cartoon. They had no idea the style of the movement that was required. I really had to go down to basics with these people, and I had to basically draw all the key poses myself, because there was no way they could really understand how to do that. And such little things that the Tom and Jerry characters are like double takes, you know, things like that, are just standard stuff. That was absolutely new to them.
Get to work.
The Czechs had a very poetic approach to animation. They were not attempting to create realism. They didn't even believe in lip sync. There's a Czech phrase that uses, which means shoveling it to them. And you don't leave anything open to the imagination of the audience. And they didn't believe in showing everything. I discovered right away was the basic difference between the American style of animation and their style of animation. We were always trying to create as much effective realism as possible. And I think the Disney studio created that. The emphasis on good lip sync and human-like reaction. Their approach was symbolic. Actually, animation in Czechoslovakia grew out of a puppet tradition. So they had puppet shows and puppet theater in their town squares and marionette shows. And so there was this long, centuries-long tradition of puppet theater in Czechoslovakia, as it was in those days. And so when film came along, they adapted the thinking of puppetry to film, in which case they didn't feel that realism was important. It was like a ballet, like the dancing movement. You couldn't say it was worse than what we were doing, it was just different. And since I had the job, though, of making films there that were going to be shown in America, I had to introduce them to the American feel and approach and idea of tempo. Tempo was quite different in American. You know, we're used to lickety-split, bing, bang, bang action. And they were more leisurely. Of course, that was the first thing I said. Well, these people have never seen one, so send me a few what you think are typical, highest quality examples. And of course, the official studio model sheets. So we had to learn how to draw the characters, and then how to learn how they moved. My former Western Woods standard of 24 frames a second, so that part wasn't the problem. It was just learning how many drawings were needed to fill out these 24 frames. I came from a UPA background, don't forget, because people tried to describe UPA and the UPA pictures in the future. They started to use the term limited animation. And UPA was a studio that did limited animation, and that drove us all crazy. Because look, it isn't limited. The animation isn't limited, it's the budget that's limited. We didn't have much money, so we had to find ways of making animation in less than full flowing style that, let's say, Disney did. It's one of the things that really attracted me immediately when I went to Prague, was I said, look, these guys, without the term, without the actual name of it, were doing exactly the same thing as UPA did. And I think nowadays there's nothing new about it, but it was tremendously revolutionary then. What I did was I played to our strengths. I knew we were never going to be able to get the animation and the timing as good as Hanna-Barbera did it, because those guys, the same animators, made those films for 20 years. And we got a group of people who had never seen a Tom and Jerry, and from a standing start, we had to start producing right away. So I knew that goal was going to be impossible. But what we did have the advantage of, because of the environment there, we could put a lot more into the per dollar, a lot more into the film than they could in America. We could use a full-size symphony orchestra. We could use really elaborate background paintings. We could use a lot of fantastic sound effects. I put a lot of emphasis on sounds and atmosphere and music and the very richness of the image to compensate for what we were not so good at.
Dicky Mo!
The phrase surrealist really is surprising to me. It never crossed my mind that we were doing anything that was surrealist. I really thought we were going to emulate the Tom and Jerry style as it was. I mean, I thought that was the assignment, was to make these films look as much like the Hanna-Barbera Tom and Jerry's as we could do it. And I wasn't thinking about surrealist. I was thinking only about how we could add something to it that maybe hadn't been done too much before. They had done some costume Tom and Jerry's. They had done some things in other locales rather than just the house situation. But I put a bigger emphasis on that, of getting different locations. We had one at castles. We had one going in rockets. We had them in Greece. We had parodies of classic stories like Moby Dick, which we called Dicky Mo, and which I think was probably the most successful one. And we did one called Carmen Get It, which was a takeoff on the opera Carmen, and which we used a complete opera-sized orchestra. I did try to get different locations to add to it, but I was hoping that we were having these characters act the way they did. One conscious difference was I eliminated the black housekeeper because that didn't work in a modern day context. We don't want anything like that. When we did the Tom and Jerry's, I had to go along with the usual standard of animated cartoons in movie theaters. Always used puns, double meanings, and so on. We made one of the Tom and Jerry's was called Buddies Thicker Than Water. One was called Landing Stripling. One was called It's Greek to Meow, Dicky Mo instead of Moby Dick, and all these typical cartoon kinds of titles. When we made the first one, which came out with the title Switchin' Kitten, the original title was Dog My Cats. That was too sophisticated for them. They threw that out. But that took place in a big castle, and it was a mad scientist, and he was transferring the dog mentality into a cat mentality, and we had lots of fantastic gadgets and everything. It was really rich looking. I brought the print to Hollywood, showed it to the MGM screening room, and Joe Vogel looked, and he said, fine, you can go ahead and do it, but he says, you don't have to have such elaborate sets. See, that was his thinking was in terms of live action. You know, it doesn't cost any more to paint a castle than it does to paint a barnyard, you know. But to him, these were elaborate sets. He said, you don't need those elaborate sets, but everything else was okay. But we did manage to get across, I think, a richness into the films that compensated for the weaknesses. I mean, I have to openly say it. I knew what we could do and what we couldn't do. I didn't think much of Tom and Jerry cartoons. I thought, first of all, they were needlessly violent. I really realized, though, that the violence was always done in such a way that the children or anyone watching it would know right away that it was just a gag. I mean, if Tom got hit on the head with a hammer and broke up into 5 pieces, nobody took that seriously, that really happened. He'd just shake his body and whoop, he's back together again. If you do that enough, you get around that and you know that you're just parodying exaggerated human actions.
Anyone can now enter the lucrative field of animated cartoons with a new Tom and Jerry cartoon kit.
I think the last one we made in the series was the Tom and Jerry cartoon kit. And that one, I almost pulled back into a UP8 style of staging and made it more abstract and made it really reveal the fact that we are animators.
This kit contains everything needed for quiet, sophisticated humor. One mean, stupid cat, one sweet, lovable mouse, and assorted deadly weapons. The coffee and cigarettes are for the cartoonists.
And so then what we did then, people could then take it as just being a parody. But that was the only one in which I did that, which was sort of a behind-the-scenes kind of a thing.
First, put the sweet, lovable mouse into a simple situation expressing a natural human need, such as eating a slice of watermelon contained in our kit. The result may not make sense, but it will last long enough for you to be comfortably seated before the feature begins.
Otherwise, we tried to make funny stories. Don't forget, most of the reactions I got were, these are the worst Tom and Jerry's ever made. I have an actual death threat saying, you know, that you should be dead, you know, for making this cartoon that's so horrible. And you can go back and look at all the books of history, many books about the history of animation. And when they come to my Tom and Jerry's, it's clear that these were the worst ones ever made. That was the opinion in those days, which I had to really overcome. And it's really surprising me that how over the years that has changed. I got a long series of email from some 10 or 11-year-old kid who had a website especially dedicated to my Tom and Jerry's. And he thought they were the very best. And that was the first one, the one that I got that brightened me up. And since that time, I think it has shifted. It's really just a personal viewpoint. Everyone will look at it in a different way. and everybody's entitled to their opinion. All I can say is that MGM liked it. I'm not an auteur, really. I'm a commercial animator. I'm willing to do the best I can with anything you throw at me. And that was all I could say. If I had to do Crazy Cat, I knew I couldn't do it like Harriman, but I did as much as I could. And the same thing with Tom and Jerry's and with anything else. Once in a while, I got a chance to create my own character, which was my favorite character of all, which is Nudnik. And I was able to do something that I really believed in cartoons. I'm very happy with those, but they unfortunately were coming at the very tail end of the cartoon short in movie theaters. Movie making is a process of compromise. If you know anything about filmmaking, it's compromise from beginning to end. And when you finish a film, if you have 60% of what you dreamed of, that's a flaming success. And that's the way I feel about anything we've done.